Hello, everyone. It's great to have you all join us for our August monthly meetup. Thank you so much for making time to be a part of our meetup today. So my name is Linda Ntifel. I am the founder of Women in Research, Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning, and I will be moderating the session for today. So Women in MEL is an online community that is focused on accelerating the careers of women in the research, monitoring, evaluation, and learning sector. However, our monthly meetups are open to all who are practitioners or experts doing anything related to research, monitoring, evaluation, and learning. It's great to have you all, and I trust that today's session will be an interactive one. So before we dive into our subject for today, I would like us to go through the agenda together, and then we'll engage in some icebreakers. I hope we're all looking forward to that. In the meantime, you're welcome to introduce yourselves in the chat. You can indicate your name, what you currently do, and your location. All right, so I'll be sharing my screen. You can let me know if you're able to see my screen. All right. So let me just put it in slideshow mode. Great. Okay, so this is our agenda. So we'll be engaging in icebreakers shortly. Then I will introduce our speaker, who will then facilitate the session. And the topic we are looking at today is developing MEL indicators and implementing them. And then we will have our Q&A and time for comments or feedback. Then I'll give announcements, and then we'll end our meetup for today. All right, so let's move on to our icebreaker. So the first one, I'd like to engage you all. Please let me know how you're feeling today, but we're going to do it differently. So instead of typing your mood, please indicate with an emoji. Just with an emoji will be enough. Okay, let's see how you're feeling. All right, so let me just read a few intros here. Okay, so we have Sophia. Sophie, she's a MEL specialist. She's joining in from, okay, she's based in NL. Okay. You're welcome, Sophie. How are you feeling today? Okay, so she says she's based in the Netherlands. Great. Well, welcome. You're welcome. Good to have you here. Okay, so please share, how are you feeling today? How are you all feeling today? Okay. So let's move on to our next icebreaker activity while we're thinking of which emojis to share. So I brought up this comic here. Please feel free to share your thoughts. What do you think about this cartoon here? Do you agree with what these two characters are saying? So let me just read it quickly. It says, so the one on the right is saying project activities, no time to start them. I'm too busy collecting monitoring data. And then he has a number of, notes on focus group discussions. He has a box full of survey results, I believe, review notes, and a whole lot. And essentially, the commentary is saying, don't let M&E burden the very programming it is supposed to serve. do you agree with this cartoon? What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? Okay, let me just read a few intros. Okay, so we have Gogo. Hi, I am Gogo from Victoria Falls, Zimbabwe. I am a monitoring and evaluation officer in waste management. Great, pleased to have you, Gogo. Okay, Deborah Dodu is smiling. Okay, she has a smiley face with and she's blushing as well. Okay. Then we have Vida Opoku, all smiles. Great, great. Okay, Thelma Lambda. She's a MEL practitioner from Cameroon. And okay, great to have you here too, Thelma. All right, any commentary on this cartoon before we dive into the next item on the agenda? What do you think? Do you agree? Or if anyone wants to share what their experience has been with M&E so far? All right, for those who just joined, you're welcome. We're engaging in two ice-breaking activities. So the first one had to do with you indicating how you're feeling today, what's your mood for today. And then the next one is on providing your thoughts on this cartoon here. All right, I'm just going to read an intro here from Deborah. Hello, everyone. I'm Deborah from Ghana. I am a student of MEL, hoping to make the switch someday. All right. Interesting. Then you're in the right place. You can connect with a few people here. All right. Anyone wants to share their opinions or their thoughts on this cartoon? There's no right or wrong answer. What do you think? Well, the cartoon speaks for itself. Yeah, it seems like it's a good piece of advice. We should let M&E serve the purpose for which it was, you know, it was established. So in our programming, we should make sure that M&E doesn't appear or seem like a burdensome activity to do. And I'm sure we can all identify with this, especially when you're working with colleagues in the programs team, and you know that M&E is a unit within program, depending on how your institution is set up. But yeah, M&E is very beneficial, and I'm sure we can all attest to that. All right, so we'll move into our next segment. Thank you all for your intros and for your engagement. So I'll stop sharing my screen now. And I'm going to invite our speaker, but before she comes to speak to us, I will read her profile so we all know who she is. All right, so Vida Opoku is a transformation-driven leader with extensive experience in monitoring, evaluation, research, and learning, also known as MERL, capacity assessment and building, and program or project management. She specializes in making MERL data relevant to strategic planning and implementation, ensuring holistic efforts to sustain outcome and impact attainment. She holds a postgraduate degree in sustainable development from the University of Sussex in the UK, and she currently works with Compassion International Ghana on a remote basis as part of the MERL team. She's committed to personal development and as well, both her own and that of others. Vida Opoku, we are pleased to have you. Thank you for making time to share your knowledge with all of us. And yeah, participants, please feel free to welcome her with a clap. Let's acknowledge her as she takes the stage to speak to us and to facilitate this next segment. Vida, you're welcome.
Wow, interesting introduction. Thank you very much. And Good afternoon, good morning, good day, and good evening, everybody. So far, so good. I can see quite a number of people from different places, from Netherlands to Zimbabwe to Ghana, and to Cameroon. So far, so good. And I also see a very beautiful combination of not necessarily women, but I'm seeing men as well. So a big shout out to Ezekiel Aqua for participating, and all our other supporting brothers and fathers and uncles who have decided to be here with us. Before I zoom into my presentation, one thing that I want to reiterate is being serious about personal development, mind and others, in the sense that I believe that in a world where things are changing every day, even in the landscape of M&E, we have M&E, we have MEL, we have MEL, we have, I mean, all kinds of versions. It's to tell us that nothing is static. So learning shouldn't be static. We never arrive. So on this platform, I want to encourage all of you to learn, to pour out to each other. So I'm not here to teach. I'm not a teacher. And as you can relate from the profile, there's nothing that shows that I'm a lecturer or anything. So we are here to have an interactive session where at the end of the day, based on experiences you have in your particular portfolio, we can, have some kind of harmony being established here. So I look forward to learning something about waste management, how M&E plays out in that sector, especially from Google, from Zimbabwe. I really look forward to having some kind of sharings from you as well. So thank you, Linda. Once again, thank you, Women in Research and MEL, for this opportunity. And I have an interesting topic to deliver, and it's about developing indicators and implementing them. One thing I want to also highlight again is whatever I'm sharing are things I have learned or I have experienced over the years, not just at a typical projectized environment, but also at the program and the strategy level. So currently, I do more of strategic planning within organizations. So how does M&E plays out at that level? So I would say that it's been a bit and pieces of various experiences gathered over the years. Apart from Deborah, who mentioned that she's an M&E student or someone trying to grasp things about M&E, do I have any other people within that category? Because in as much as we want to, should I say, go very basic, we also want to be a bit technical so that it can be well situated for the kind of audience we have here. Do we have any other individual that can just show by hand? If not, forgive me if I don't go in depth into certain concepts, if I just give just a brief description. But of course, we hope to have further engagement. I'll be open to further engagement even beyond this platform or this learning session, so that we can learn more as we move along. Yes, so I have an interesting picture here, and it's intentional. A tree, and you could see that it's been blown by the wind. And someone may ask that when the wind is blowing, what shows that it is blowing? That is the question that we should be asking ourselves. And why do I bring this concept here? Is to tell us that when you talk about indicators, they are everywhere. It's not necessarily, it's not an M&E terminology, but it is everywhere. So if you're a parent here, what shows that the money that you are investing into your child's education is actually giving out the results you are looking for? Okay, so you expect to see some end of term results and end of semester results. That is indicative of whether your child is doing well or not. And based on that, you can make certain decisions as to where exactly you need to target certain, certain support. So basically, when we talk about, so I think I have, in a way, touched on what we should expect. Okay, so it's going to be a very brief discussion, but not so exhaustive. One thing I can say is that when it comes to developing and implementing indicators, it can have its own trajectory depending on the context that you are working in. So if, for instance, you are in a very typical operational side where you are dealing with finances, where you are dealing with HR performance issues, your context may be so different as it's more operational, but at the programmatic level, it can also have its own dimension that it can take. So it all boils down to having some kind of fundamental understanding on how some of these things work out depending on your context. Then based on those fundamental understanding, you can build upon it. So I would want to briefly touch on what are indicators, the types and the categories, and then to the main topic that is about developing them. Most of us are aware of the SMART criteria, the specific, measurable, attainable, realistic or relevant, depending on, again, the context, and also time bound. Testing new indicators, the implementation, some realities or complexities that I would want to share based on my experiences. And what can we achieve together? At the end of the day, I look forward to, regardless of whether you know M&E or not, or whether you just want to glean on something to help you in your own personal learning trajectory. I'm looking forward to we having a fundamental, a cross-cutting understanding on indicators and how they work out and how you can develop indicators and how you can implement them or make it work within your context. I'm also looking out for we having an understanding on the fact that indicators have to be adaptable. And I believe that COVID has taught us a lot about the need to reorganize and readjust, and they need to relook at how best we can measure what our success may look like as the situation change, as the landscape change as a result of unpredictable incidents like COVID. And I would want to repeat that the fact that you have developed indicators does not mean it's a do or die affair. I mean, as time changes, you need to adapt to new approaches. You need to reconsider what you call indicators for your success within your program or within operations that you work in. And for you, I look forward to also knowing what are your expectations. You can put them in the chat because of time. But for me, what I look forward to is at the end of the day, we should be able to interact very well. I would want to seek your permission to be calling out names because there are sessions where we would be working together, and I would really look forward to having that kind of interaction from you. So to reiterate all that I said about indicators and what they are, depending on where you find yourself, the basic understanding is how do you know that you're achieving results? So how do you know that the intervention, the indoor residual spraying intervention that you rolled out in a certain community is giving you the results that you are looking for? That is when you need something to actually demonstrate that result. So if you want to know that the wind is blowing, then you should see the tree moving left or right. That is indicative of the fact that the wind is blowing. So if indeed you've rolled out a literacy program to improve the literacy skills of children between 5 to 12 years, what can let us know we are succeeding in this intervention or not? So that is where indicators come in to help us to measure. And also depending on the context, some environment they will use words like matrix, index, indices, measures, but it's basically the same thing. It's all about demonstrating or telling us whether we are achieving the result that we are looking for. On a very broad categorization approach, we can put indicators into two main streams.
the quantitative and the qualitative. Quantitative meaning it has a numerical basis, and it means you can quantify. So we are talking about number of schools built within a particular period. So if your intervention is about improving access to education through infrastructure, then you should be interested in the number of schools that have been built within a particular period. Qualitative, you may be interested in satisfaction measures, where people were going to express the extent to which they were satisfied with a particular program or satisfied with a particular service. So if, for instance, you are in the human resource department and you want to assess the extent to which the employees are satisfied with the services that the HR unit is providing, you may want to send out, or you may want to assess some kind of satisfaction measuring, where you want to find out whether they are satisfied with how HR maybe responds to grievances, the extent to which they are satisfied with the conditions of service. So some of those ones are qualitative. They are more of they express perceptions, people's experiences. They don't really have numerical value, let me put it that way. But of course, in analyzing, you can attach some numerical basis to it. That's when you can introduce things like the Likert scale, where at the end of your analysis, you can know you can deduce some kind of quantitative measurements from that qualitative assessment that you've done. But beyond these two broad categorization of indicators, we have what we call the standard indicators, the proxy indicators, the composite indicators. And these ones can either be both. So you can have standard indicators that are quantitative or that can be qualitative. You can have proxy indicators that can be quantitative or qualitative. You can have composite indicators that are either quantitative or qualitative. So with standard indicators, for those in the nutrition field, you can be talking about stunting. Someone will say there is no way you can do a nutrition program or intervention without measuring some, should I say, recognized or accepted indicators. I mean, those ones are like the non-trade-off indicators. They are standardized. Everywhere it is accepted that this is how we measure malnutrition amongst children. These are the key indicators that you should be looking out for. And stunting, we are talking about height for age that is less than 2 standard deviations. So they are needed also to provide some kind of comparative what do you call it, approach. I mean, if because stunting is standard, you can compare stunting across various groups, various communities, various countries, and it can guide some kind of comparative analysis across various geographies. And when we talk about proxy, there are more of indirect indicators or indicators that could serve as a means to also achieve another indicator. So, for instance, you have an indicator about community protection as a result of indoor residual spraying. And the question is, how do you measure the extent to which a community is protected? So an example could be, okay, could we also measure, could we have an indicator that talks about the extent to which people have the number of houses that have received the indoor residual spraying within that particular community? That could be a proxy indicator to the extent to which a community has been protected by indoor residual spraying for that particular program. Then when we talk of composites, we are looking at various indicators coming together to help us understand a particular what do you call situation. So when you talk about the Human Development Index, it's not just one indicator, it's many indicators coming together to help us know the extent to which a particular country has been developed, or their people have been developed. So with HDI, you're looking at life expectancy, you're looking at education, you're looking at income per capita. So all these things come together, making it coming together to give us HDI, that is the Human Development Index for a particular country at a given point in time. So moving away from here, I want us to have some kind of interaction. And with this understanding, I believe that now, whether you are an M&E person or not, you should have, you now have a fair idea of what an indicator would be. How would you want to measure success if you are a donor, if you are a program manager? Everybody wants success, and everyone wants to see some kind of progress happening. So if we have that kind of mindset, we should be able to do this together. So I have a case study here. This is, should I say, it's actually a real life, but I just did some bit of tweaking just for our consumption this evening. So based on an experience I have had over the past about when I had to support a literacy program development, there was some community engagement and needs were assessed, and the challenge or what the problem that was identified was low literacy competencies or skills of children between 5 to 12 years. And it was highlighted as a problem because from the assessment and from the needs assessment, we identified its association with poor school performance. That is to say that, yes, if the person cannot really read or doesn't have the basic reading skills, it's difficult for the person to really excel in class. So we identified that association based on the problem tree analysis. We also identified that it was also connected to high school dropout. Some of the children, upon further investigations, we identified that because they were not excelling so well, and also as a result of the stigmatization associated with being repeated in the class for more than 2 times, some of them just decide to leave school. Some parents too, as a result of they not wanting to throw away money, also decided to take their children out of school. But the key or the fundamental challenge that was identified was the low literacy competency skills. And in breaking it down, it was also identified that what was actually causing this was low capacity of local implementing partners to deliver literacy intervention. So these children were found in communities that had some kind of interventions running. Was about education access, but unfortunately, because the local implementing partners not have the capacity to rule out intentional literacy interventions, those contributed to the challenge in that community. There was also situations about there was also an issue with poor infrastructure at the home, where yes, at the home, learning is supposed to still take place, reading is supposed to take place, but even that environment where parents are supportive of their children, where parents are given their children books to read, the space, even in the house. We are not saying that necessarily have a whole library in the house, but where at least in the evenings, the child can have a quiet place where they can sit and read. That was also identified as a challenge. And it wasn't just at the home, but even at the community, where there wasn't really a resource center or a library to support some kind of reading activities. There was also the challenge associated with even where there were libraries, they were not functional. So, when it comes to the parents, it also brings back to their ability in terms of where you have an illiterate mother, or father, how will the person support you in reading at home? And where the person doesn't even understand, or even having the income to buy the books, how then do we support reading for the child? So based on this analysis of the needs and analyzing the problem, fast forward, this was identified as an objective or a goal for an intervention that would want to be rolled out by a certain organization. So based on the problem, assessing the landscape, the main objective was to build functional literacy competence of beneficiaries by 2025. And based on the problem that I have briefly gone through, these were the main objectives that were identified to help us achieve the goal of building functional literacy. And of course, strengthening the capacity of the local implementing partner was key. So having their capacity strengthened. And number 2 was seeing an increased capacity of the caregivers. So this was identified. The increase was intentionally put there because based on the assessment, it was established that yes, the capacity, some of the parents had what it takes, but not all, and there was that need to, augment those efforts. So that is why we see an increase. Same with the capacity as well. Then also we want to see increased access to community-based learning opportunities for the beneficiaries. And finally, an improved program effectiveness, which is linked to the objective 4, because if the program effectiveness in terms of they having the right skills to develop or design interventions, and they be able to manage those interventions or programs with the right capacity, the local implementing partners can actually work together to roll out those interventions targeted at the beneficiaries and their caregivers. So at this juncture, I would want to open up for us to have a discussion. We have established that indicators provides a measurement of how we want to, of the success we want to achieve. What is indicative of the fact that we are achieving something. So in this scenario, I want us to have some discussions. Okay, we can just focus on any of the objectives and just have some discussions. This floor is opened. What would be a measure of we saying that indeed there's been an increased capacity of caregivers to support home literacy activities? Anyone with any suggestions? You can just unmute and just share, or you can also type in the chats as well.
Hello.
Hello, Ezekiel.
Yes. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning.
All accepted.
Thank you so much, Vida. That's a very insightful presentation. Though you are not done yet, yes. But yes, so the increased capacity of caregivers. I was just wondering how we're going to measure the increased capacity, the increased access, and the improved effectiveness. But let me concentrate on one for now. So let's say, for instance, the increased capacity, maybe you may have some pre-test to assess their capacity before the start of the program, and to assess them after the program or the capacity has been given to them. They will now assess their knowledge again after the training. Yes. So if there's any improvement in, let's say somebody initially got the you got 10%, then after the post-training, you got about 60–70%. Then we'll assume that yes, there has been an increased capacity out of the training that you give. But I don't know whether that is what was done, or and it looks like from your presentation, I had a sense that you finished the work before coming back to set of objectives. I don't know, but I had some notion, I can clarify. If you go, as soon as you started mentioning increased capacity, I was just asking myself, how are we going to measure the increase capacity?
Interesting remarks, sharings from Ezekiel. And I want to reiterate that it is to all of us, we are having discussions, okay? But I would answer, Mr. Akwa, I would give some bit of background, okay? So the reason why in my presentation, I highlighted that there was a reason why that direction was introduced by saying increase in the sense that based on the landscape assessment or the context assessment that was done prior to arriving at these objectives, it was identified that some caregivers had what it takes to support their children at home to read, okay? But it was very low. Some may have had the income, but they were not literacy competent enough. I mean, they couldn't really read. So there was that need to have some kind of adult education being rolled out to, I mean, build them up basically at that level. So that is why, yes, even though it was recognized that there was some capacity available, the objective was then, how then do we augment it? So that was why that direction was introduced, that increased word was introduced in the objective. I hope I've answered your question, Mr. Akwa.
Yeah, so if I may ask, how did we determine that the capacity was low?
Okay, excellent question. So the question, the fundamental question would be what defined, or what was our definition of capacity? Okay. Yes, so our definition was capacity was looking at, one, the ability to actually support reading, where the caregiver is able to read themselves. So they understand the English language based on a very basic assessment that was made, and they are able to, I mean, understand what, so they're able to support the child in reading. The other capacity was also about the ability to provide books or buy books for the child, in order to for them to also continue the efforts of reading at home when they're at home. So those were the key things, aside the, I mean, making sure that maybe at 7 o'clock they have that understanding, or that importance, acknowledging the importance of reading. So maybe at 7 o'clock the child is reading. That one was also another side altogether. But the key things that defined our capacity was with the should I say, the literacy competence of the caregiver, and also the income, the income support, where they're able to buy books or provide other literacy materials to support literacy engagement at the home. So those were the two things that defined capacity for us for this particular intervention. Please, I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Akwa. Please, any other?
Yes, we have Thelma Lambda.
Okay.
She's put her submission in the chat, but I'm sure she may also want to speak to it. Thelma.
Hello.
Hello, Thelma.
I thank you so much for your presentation. So just to go straight to your question, I'm a little bit I've looked at all of the objectives, and I'm trying to look at all of the possible indicators that could go. And I agree with Mr. Ezekiel when he spoke about using the pre and post evaluation to measure the indicator of increased capacity. So, but another indicator I think that we could use, and I do not know which objective. I'm caught between objective 2 and objective 4.
Okay.
Where we have the increased capacity of caregivers to support home literacy activities. I think that a possible indicator for this objective would be the increase in the number of literacy activities in the community, because if the caregivers have their capacities improved, then definitely maybe per homes, they're going to be more, there's going to be an increase in the literacy activity. And I think that this indicator equally applies to objective 4, because that's like the sum. Yeah, it shows that the program was actually very effective if there are more caregivers who are implementing more literacy activities in the community. So that was and to also answer Mr. Ezekiel again on how you know the capacity, or you know what is defined as capacity. I think that is why it is always advisable to carry out a needs assessment before implementing a program of this nature, so that you're not implementing ex nihilo, but actually dealing with the facts that are on ground. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Thelma. This is very insightful. So insightful. Thank you so much. So I would say that for the sake of time, I would just quickly rush through the other slides, then we can go to the Q&A more. But just to reiterate all that have been said, one thing that I would want to point out is poor development goes with poor implementation. And when we talk about poor development of indicators, or the whole idea about developing indicators, it's very critical for you to do what is necessary in terms of, one, Thelma mentioned the very key thing about assessing the needs. So from the very beginning, you are assessing the needs, or you're assessing the landscape, you're assessing your context, you're assessing what is really the situation. And based on that kind of assessment, it can actually foster or facilitate you arriving at the right indicators that are not just about it being smart, okay, but it's about what is really meeting the needs of the people. So in this era where we are having so much conversations around participatory approaches, community-led meal, community-led MEL, from experience, one thing, and especially with this literacy assessment, one thing that was really highlighted based on that experience was that when you begin with the people, developing the indicators with the people also becomes less cumbersome. And your ability to implement those indicators you develop with the people also become less cumbersome. And what do I mean by that? So from your needs assessment, where you get to engage people, where you're engaging caregivers, where you're engaging the beneficiaries, the youth, where you're engaging program officers at the community level, you would be able to have further discussions where after they have, of course, I'm taking learnings from my experience based on having to hear from them, about what are their challenges, what is the problem, what is happening in the community. Based on those conversations, then you ask them that, or you have also further conversations on what then can we do about the problem. And it is not a check the box question, but the idea is at the end of the day, as any transformation-driven development professional or worker or program officer, you would want to make sure that whatever intervention that you roll out, that you propose to your target community, should be relevant to the context. And in establishing that, it's about when you get to give that opportunity to engage the people from the very beginning. So if these due diligence activities are executed, where you've done your participatory needs assessment, you have identified what they would call success. And of course, sometimes one thing that I can highlight is, yes, sometimes in engaging the community people, they may not have that technical, esoteric ability. I mean, all that they want to see is my child can read, okay? All they want to see is my child is doing well in school. But you come in as a technical person, you then facilitate that technical aspect where you can now let them appreciate the fact that it's not just about my child being first, because you can be first with 50% in English. But when it comes to the competency level, you can still be low. So in having those conversations, you can be able to come out with what indicators really work, what standard indicators that you can introduce in that particular intervention. I made mention of standard indicators. There are indicators that if you are doing certain interventions like nutrition, like literacy, there's no way you can say that you measure literacy levels by just hearing or using any other mere approach. You would have to undertake some kind of early grade reading assessment, the EGRA approach, to be able to assess and come out with whether a child is able to read or not. But the whole essence of working together with the people for a particular intervention is
when you're able to come out with what defines their success, it helps in developing indicators that really addresses the challenge. So you know the need, you know that the need here is not just about the child being able to read, or just about the child the parent has money, but it's about the parent having the money to be able to provide books for the child to be able to read. So in having a very good understanding of the need and coming out with what really is the success you are looking out for, you're able to have an established picture of the situation. And based on that, you can now, come out with a very robust theory of change or logic model or any other framework that you want to, help you to assess the need. And based on that defined situation, you can now come out with very good indicators that addresses the problem, not just at a strategic level, but also at the community or at the context level. So one thing that I would want to share based on my experience would be that in coming out with or in developing indicators, you may have to establish what really the situation is. And in establishing the situation and having further engagement, you may want to, in a way, also identify what success will look like. And if you work in certain matrix organization structures, you realize that you have very complex stakeholders and everyone will have what they look out for, what their expectations are. But one thing that we shouldn't forget as development professionals is, at the end of the day, it's for the people. It should happen at the community level. So there will be that need to have that further engagement to establish what really would success look like. So at the people level, at the community level, you may want to have some co-MEL or community-led MEL indicators established. At the programmatic or at the organizational level, those ones too can also be established. But everything comes down to having an established situation. What really is it that we want to call out as a success? Then based on that, you can now come out with key indicators that would help to address whether at the end of the day you are addressing or you are mitigating the problem that was identified from the needs assessment or not. And of course, you should be able to identify or establish that there's a direct linkage with what you want to measure, as well as the perspective of the target group and other stakeholders. And it has to be practical. The question here will be, I have not made anything or any mention about SMART, anything about CREAM, anything about reliability or validity. But one thing I would want to reiterate here is, if these considerations are made, you realize that you would get to actually take the box on whether that indicator is SMART. Is it specific enough? If you have an established situation, of course, you need to know specifically the problem you are targeting, you're addressing is, for instance, poor nutrition among children under 5. So if that is established, there's no way you can miss out on the specificity, sorry. And if it's about it being measurable, you're asking yourself, okay, what is informing the issue about malnutrition in that particular community? So based on the kind of robust and inclusive or participatory approach you undertake in assessing the needs before an intervention comes out, before you come out with your logic model and your indicators, you're able to come out with what really should be an indicator for that particular intervention. And of course, as you engage, you get to know that there are some indicators that may be SMART, but they may not necessarily be relevant or cross-cutting relevant indicator. And what do I mean by that? So if, for instance, after you have come out with everything, there's an indicator about percentage of children that have access to for instance, smartphones for digitalized, curriculum implementation. The question would be, would that indicator be relevant in all contexts within the geographies that you are working in? So again, it will also come back to going back to the drawing board to now assess, okay, for a particular context, maybe this indicator may have to be revised. You may have to look at it in another way. So I would say that these suggestions or these recommendations does not relegate the SMART criteria or the CREAM criteria. But I would want to reiterate that if these due diligences are executed, you realize that whatever indicator you come out with, it will be what is workable, not just at the organizational level, but also at the grassroots level, making whatever that you would seek to measure relevant to the context of the places that you seek to bring about the development that you want to achieve at the end of the day. So moving away from this, I would want to end by, or I would want to finally conclude by saying that a lot of things go into developing indicators. It requires a lot of stakeholder engagement. It requires a lot of validations with the stakeholders that you work with. But at the end of the day, when what it works is agreed upon and you are implementing, what can actually streamline implementation for me has been coming out with an indicator reference sheet. Some organizations will call it compendium, an indicator cheat sheet, but it all boils down to, after everything has been agreed upon, you now want to write out, you now want to make it bare in terms of what really is that indicator that you're looking out for? What does it mean? So anyone who picks this sheet up is able to know that, okay, if you are looking at an indicator such as the proportion of local implementing partners that are implementing literacy activities according to standards, someone like Mr. Akwa would want to ask, when you say standards, what do you mean by that? So that is when a definition will come in. And we are here saying that this indicator is all about the percentage of trained local implementing partners that have successfully implemented literacy interventions within their communities and have been assessed by technical team. So this is actually what was developed from the example I gave. The technical team were a technical group of people that were made up of people from the local education service and other entities that were actually technical people when it comes to literacy programming. And they served as supervisory units to actually supervise these local implementing partners for them to roll out appropriate literacy interventions. So they come in as more of assessors of these local implementing partners. So for us to say that indeed this LIP has implemented a successful literacy intervention, it would have to be in a way certified by these technical team members. So we have the baseline value, the milestones. So from 2021, we look forward to by 2023, 35% of this being achieved. And finally, by 2025, 1 to 60% achieved for that particular indicator. And of course, someone will ask, how then do we get this information? We are saying that the ones to actually provide us will be the technical people, because they are the ones who actually have the supervisory role to assess these LIPs for them to give us feedback from on the ground, and they are the ones responsible. And we also want to go further to ask about what would be the frequency of collecting data on this indicator, and based also on stakeholder consultative engagement, the 6 months was actually agreed. So with this being shared, realize that there is no way you can actually say you have done a successful development of indicators or implementing them without that kind of intentional stakeholder engagement, where you're having conversations with the targets group, you're having conversations with technical groups, having conversations with internal, external stakeholders, and the whole essence is you would want to come up with something that really works, not just on the ground, but also at the policy level, and also not just at the policy level, but also on the ground. And the other thing that is also critical to implement indicators is you must have the capacity. So when your indicators have been established, or when you have developed them, of course, you may have to train, you may have to have the tools in place where that can support the process, the people, the infrastructure. Some organizations may have a whole MIS system in place to actually, or a cloud system in place to support the processes. And of course, you would also want to put in structures to validate the data, do some kind of data quality assessment as well as data is being collected. So basically, this is what I would say I can share based on experience. But the other things that I've also identified as complexities, and after all have been said and done, I mean, you can do a very good job coming out with very good smart indicators where everyone is involved, but issues like climate change could, I mean, be a factor where, if for instance, your intervention was about your intervention was about these children, the literacy interventions, for instance, where the children get to meet maybe on weekly basis in a particular place within the community, or they go to the library, then COVID happens. I mean, they don't even get to go out to go to the library. So indicators about library access and accessing books in the library, you may have to look at it again. Issues about climate change, we are hearing in Ghana, there are issues about flooding in some areas of Ghana. The moment it starts raining, I mean, movement become restricted. So if there are indicators about accessing a library, you may want to relook at it. And of course, in the era of promoting Made in Africa, M&E approaches, democratizing M&E approaches, we may want to look at indigenous approaches. Some of us, we are privy to some practices where mothers would want to put beads around their babies. All these things are in a way indicative of whether the baby is growing or not. And in this era, we want to have further conversations around whether we want to consider some of these indigenous approaches as we do our MEL practices. And of course, cultural barriers. For those of us in the agricultural sector, you may be interested in having data, having indicators about percentage of female farmers having access to, say, farms, okay? But there are issues about land rights, land ownership in some areas, and all these things serve as complexities that may cause us to rethink about certain indicators and whether they can work within a particular context or not. So I would say that this is not exhaustive enough, but I believe in it have provided some kind of fundamental understanding about how indicators can be developed and how you can implement them, and certain things that we should be considering in our further conversations in our various offices, in our various units and places that we work in. So I would end here and I will hand over to Linda. I have exhausted the time. Apologies for that, but I can still, I look forward to receiving feedback from the people on the call and any other thing to improve our learnings for this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you too, Vida. Thank you so much for such an insightful presentation. And don't worry about the time. We can allow for a few questions. Maybe we can spend about 10 minutes, if that's okay with participants. If you have any questions, this is the time, this is the hour. I see Thelma has her hand up. Thelma, please unmute.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Vida, for your presentation. I just need clarification on something you said about quantitative and qualitative indicators. I have always known that, well, the definition you gave for quantitative indicators are indicators that are used, that are measured using figures, or they have a numerical values. So I want to ask that, can we also call quantitative indicators output indicators and call qualitative indicators outcome indicators?
Interesting question, Thelma. So I wanted to ask you this. You've brought about two interesting concepts, outcome and output. Okay. And
Yes.
so there are two things. I mean, the dimension about the levels of measurement are entirely different from the types of indicators, or the concepts of measurement are entirely different from the types of indicators that can be used for measuring those concepts. So I mean, with output, you are not talking about the immediate results you see when you roll out an intervention, right?
isn't it?
Yeah, yes,
Outputs.
yes,
So you
yes,
do a
but
training.
no,
Hello,
please go
Thelma.
ahead.
Hello, Thelma.
Yes, hello.
Yes. So let's
Hello,
use
you
this.
can go ahead.
Okay. So you do a training, okay, and the essence of the essence of this training is that you want to see the to adopting this training, okay, and to use this training in the classroom so that children can now do well in maths or do well in English, okay. So at the output level, when, for instance, you call them for, let's say, a training meeting, they come. One key thing that you with the meeting, right?
Yeah.
Very good. Then we are talking about outcome. Outcome, we are talking about changes in terms of behavior. You're talking about people having perceptions changing. You're talking about lives being improved, okay? And it takes time. And going back to the preamble, we are saying that the whole essence of why you are training these teachers is you want them to adopt this training, use it in their classroom so that the children can do well in maths, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if someone after 5 years, okay, someone comes to say that I came for this training, and when I used it as a teacher in the classroom, now initially when I teach maths, it's only 5 people that were able to get A plus. But when I went for the training and I used what they taught me, now I'm seeing 100 students out of 150 having A plus. So if I come up with an indicator about the proportion of students who are being tutored by the trained teachers, who are who are excelling in class, and excelling is where they're having A plus. Okay, would that indicator necessarily be a quantitative or a qualitative indicator at the outcome level?
I think that it's a quantitative. I don't know.
Okay, let me go over it
It's a bit
again.
confusing. It's a bit
Okay,
confusing for me
for you.
because yes,
Mhm.
because I think that the fact that you have around 100 and something students who have gotten an A grade
Mhm.
from learning that
Mhm.
method.
Mhm.
I think that that is an increase in their capacity, and we can easily associate that to an outcome because it's a
Yes.
change in their behavior. So I
Mhm.
would love to think that is an outcome indicator.
Mhm. Mhm. So has it also clarified that an outcome indicator shouldn't necessarily be a qualitative or a quantitative. It's about what you are addressing as your issue.
Yeah.
Please, did you get the picture?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So you made a very important contribution about the need. Okay, what was the need?
Yes.
The need was they wanted to see children doing well in the maths class. So how were they addressing that need? They realized that based on their needs assessment, they realized that if these teachers receive some kind of special training and they adopt that training, okay, they adopt by using it in the classroom, they can do that. And one teacher called Vida adopted it, used it in the class, and initially from the baseline, only 5% or only 5 people could have A plus in maths. But when the teacher got the training, adopted it and used it in the classroom, now we are having 100 out of 150 students having A+. So at that change level, an indicator which is about percentage of teacher and student excelling as a result of this intervention. Okay, it is speaking to the need. So it's not necessarily about boxing yourself and saying that if it is at the outcome level, it should necessarily be a qualitative or indicator or qualitative. Please, is that clear now?
Yes, that is very clear. Thank you very much, Vida.
You're welcome very much. Thank you so much.
All right. Please, are there any more questions? Okay, I'm checking. Please, are there any more questions from anyone? Or if you want to share your comments or share your experiences. Okay, I have a question, Vida. I hope you can still hear me well.
Yes.
Okay, great.
I can hear you very well, please.
Okay, great. Okay, so my question has to do with in a situation where, yes, you have these indicators, you've set targets, you know where you want to get to, but for some reason, as you mentioned when you were ending, there could be some complexities that could hinder you or let's say your colleagues from achieving the project success that you desire. In such an instance or such instances, like what's the best way to document or like to report back to let's say the funder that because of A, B, and C, I wasn't able or we weren't able to meet these targets, even though we're able to measure progress, but because of this and that, we weren't able to, like, what's the best way to state or mention that, you know, these indicators were not able to, you know, meet the targets as we would have wanted to, even though we had these indicators to help us.
Linda, I missed you along the line. So
Okay.
Can you repeat what your question again, please?
Okay. So I was saying that in a situation where you have these indicators and you know where you want to get to in terms of like your targets or your goals, in a situation where you're not able to meet your targets, like what's the best way to highlight that when you're reporting back to funders or those who provided the funds for the project to be implemented?
Okay. Thank you very much. I will share this in two perspectives, again, from experience, okay? So I would say that the MEL, the L part of NNE, in a way has given room for certain things to be mitigated before it, should I say, it gets to a worse situation, okay? So during COVID, I mean, there were programs that were running for a period of time, and I mean, all these things could happen. Based on a personal experience, one thing that I realized was in an environment where there's a lot of where there's intentional structures to learn and also to adapt, the adaptive management component, where okay, you are not meeting your targets, then what do we do? So an example would be that I had opportunity to work on an indoor residual spraying program. And the approach to the programming was where you go to communities, you do your indoor residual spraying. But when implementation took place, for 2-3 weeks, a trend was identified that for every week, though there were targets that were set for the operations, that is in terms of the number of rooms that are supposed to be sprayed, one trend that was identified that especially for farming communities during raining seasons, it was very difficult. The number or the target that was set in terms of number of structures that were sprayed for a particular week was very low as compared to any other week of operations. And in engaging the data that was identified, it was now realized that, okay, we have 12 weeks to work, but for this particular community within this period of operations, going to the community at that time was we get to the community by say 8 and the farmers are not there, because during rainy season every farmer would want to be now doing a lot of serious work, and unfortunately during the rainy seasons too, the roads are, I mean, inaccessible. So one, it's difficult getting into the communities, and two, you are getting there late because the farmers are not there, and when you get there they are not there, you cannot get access to their rooms to spray, so you are not able to meet your target. And should this continue for say 6 weeks, 12 weeks, you should expect to report something else to your donor or to your funder. So what did we do as an organization? What we did was, okay, one, because we want to assess the farming communities, then engaging data, we then had to change how we operate. That is where the adaptive management comes in. We now want to change how we will work entirely. So instead of committing every day to the community, we will now camp in the community, where we would want to camp in farming communities or close by communities, do the spraying before you continue. So what point am I making here? I believe that in any organization where there's a lot of intentional efforts or structures for learning and adaptive management, there are some situations that can be managed. Some of these complexities can be managed prior to you getting to an end of maybe a term or a phase of a project or a program. Now go reporting to the funder that we couldn't achieve this because of that. But where there's a lot of intentional engagement with data, and organizations too are also ready to adapt operations and approaches of implementation, they can also do that as well. So I would say that is one other way. The other thing would be that I am yet to experience such a thing, but if I should be in the shoes of, let's say, a senior manager, I would want to be intentional about having, should I say, providing some kind of situational reports that I'll be sending to my funder. So it's not necessarily about sending maybe end of term review or anything, but where maybe quarterly or monthly, you are providing some kind of situational reports or landscape assessments where you want to share with the funder or donor, engaging with whoever, that this is what is happening within the landscape and this is what we should expect. This is what internally we are managing the situation. I believe that when such conversations are made, it could in a way facilitate how some of these complexities could also be mitigated. This is what I would share based on experiences from my work. But of course, I would want to throw it to my brothers and sisters on this platform for them to share how they manage some of these situations.
Great. Thank you so much, Vida, for your response. Okay, is there any question from anyone, or if you want to add on to Vida's submission on the question I asked, you're welcome to do so. So we are about ending. We've drawn the curtains down soon to our meetup for today. But before we do, I don't think there are any more questions. Vida, would you want to give your last final words?
Okay, so I would first of all want to thank everyone for making it
to this engagement. And a big shout out to Thelma and Mr. Akwa for, sharing, and sorry, I didn't get those who put their comments in the chat, but I would want to say a very big thank you. And I would say that let's keep on participating in this monthly series by Women in MEL, because it's very insightful. And I also want to reiterate the fact that there's never an end to learning, especially when it comes to monitoring, evaluation, and learning, as well as in the research domain. The context is very diversified. So what works in a particular area may not necessarily work in another. So let us be quick to be very abreast with the context, and be adaptable enough to be able to appreciate what works, so we can make our work relevant to any given context that we're working. Thank you very much, Linda. Over.
Thank you too, Vida. All right, our participants, at this juncture, you can show Vida some love, appreciation, whichever way you want to appreciate her for sharing her depth of knowledge with us today. Thank you so much, Vida. I've also I've shared your LinkedIn profile in the chat so people can connect with you afterwards. And I've also shared our feedback form, so please spend some time to provide feedback. And also, if you'd want to volunteer to host a session or facilitate a session, you can do so, or propose a topic which could benefit us all. Please feel free to do that using the feedback form. I've also shared the Women in MEL X profile or page, and also the Women in MEL LinkedIn page. And then I will also lastly add the Women in MEL YouTube channel, where you can access the meetups that we've had since last year till now. Today's recording will be uploaded there as well. So you can subscribe, and then you can turn on the notification so that when the video is uploaded, you would be able to you would get the notification to do so. All right, so thank you all for coming. Thank you all for making time today. Thank you for making today's meetup an engaging one. Thank you, Vida, once again. This will not be the last time we'll invite you. Hopefully, would invite you again to speak about a topic that, one of us might propose to you, or any hot topic out there that will be relevant to us all. All right, thank you all once again. Thank you, Andrew, Cephas, Deborah, Esther, Evelyn, Ezekiel, Gogo, Jonathan, Mamadou, Thelma, Yao, all who joined and have dropped off. Thank you all, and hopefully we'll meet each other again next month. All right, so enjoy a happy end to your week. Bye.
Bye.